Sam, thank you for your reflection and for giving me a new word, bike shedding. I love that. Shall I paint it blue or pink or green? What color shall the bike shed be? But you choose not to dwell in the multiple choices. You choose to go to an ice cream store that has 4 choices only, so that makes it fairly simple for you. I remember years ago reading about people buying strawberry jam at the grocery store. And if you went into a big supermarket and there were 20 kinds of strawberry jam on the shelves, it was overwhelming. It was too much. And sometimes people would just leave the store without buying any strawberry jam at all. Whereas if you went to your grocery store and there was just 1 or 2 pots of strawberry jam, that was much easier. So that's a little bit like Sam going to Smitten. But this morning I'm wanting to explore what would happen if one evening, a lovely summer evening in San Francisco, but warm, Sam decided to walk down the street and go to Smitten to get one of his lovely favorite ice cream cones. But the door was shut. Not only shut, but there was a notice on it saying, "Gone out of business." Sometimes we make choices, and they seem to be good choices. But then, as they say, life happens. Many, many years ago, I was at a workshop called Telling Our Stories. And we went around a group of maybe 15, 18 of us, beginning at 10 years old, what we were doing when we were 10 years old. And then a decade later, 20. And then a decade later, 30. And what was so poignant about these Telling Our Stories was that I remember somebody at 20 saying, "Oh, I'm going to go ahead and get a PhD in such and such a subject, and I think I'll have a child, but I don't want to be married." And at 30, things hadn't worked out. She'd had a very serious illness. She'd had to drop out of her PhD program. Things were different. And that is what so often happens in life. We make plans, we have ideas, we have our route ahead very clearly in our minds, and then something happens. And this is what I think Stanley Kunitz is writing about at the first part of the poem, which I'm going to read again. "I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I'm compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon, the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. I had thought I would be all sorts of things. I thought I would be a painter to begin with. And then I thought I would be a furniture designer because I needed to earn a living. And then I met Peter, and I came to America. And so I had to start all over again. And that was a good decision because all sorts of wonderful things came out of that. But I had to readjust. I had to ask myself, what am I going to do now? Sometimes life happens and we are caught short. We don't know how to deal with it. It's not what we wanted. Epictetus is a Stoic philosopher who was born in 50 in the Common Era, born with a lot of problems in his life. He was lame, he was small, he was enslaved and taken to Rome, and only later emancipated, he began to go into the forum and listen to some of the philosophers who were speaking there of a way of being in the world, because you can't always choose what happens to you, but you can choose how you will be with it. And this way of being in the world that the Stoic philosophers were speaking of was a way of calmness, a way of peacefulness, not reactive. And later, Epictetus was expelled from Rome and went to Greece when he was 40 and started himself teaching. And although he never wrote anything, his teachings were written down by a pupil of his. And in one of these, he writes about going to the public baths, where he's looking forward to having a nice bath in the public pool, and then imagining to himself what it might be like. He writes, or he said, "If you're going to bathe, place before yourself what happens in the bath. Some splashing the water, others pushing one against another, others abusing one another, and some stealing, and thus, with more safety, you will undertake the matter. If you say to yourself, 'I now intend to bathe and to maintain my will in a manner conformable to my nature,' and so you will do for every act. If any hindrance to bathing happens, let this thought be ready. It is not this only that I wanted, but I intended also to maintain my will in a way conformable to nature, but I shall not maintain it so if I'm vexed at what happens." So Epictetus had realized that he couldn't determine everything that happens in his life, but he was able to choose how he wanted to be with it. And this is the big lesson that I didn't learn for at least 40 years of my life. I thought that when things happened, I reacted. It was normal, everybody would. And I would say things like, "Oh, she makes me so angry," or "that really irritated me." I didn't realize I had a choice. I'm not a Stoic. I don't believe that I can possibly in this lifetime disattach from my emotions. But I do believe and realize that I can learn a great deal from Epictetus and other Stoics. There's an incident I remember when I had just entered Starking School for the Ministry. I was in my mid-40s. And I came home one day, we lived in Berkeley, and sat down at the dining room table to have lunch quickly to go back to classes. And one of my teenage children came in and dumped themselves rather aggressively in the chair across from me, and then started to be really rude and unpleasant. And everything in me wanted to say, "Don't speak like that to your mother, behave yourself," which wouldn't have been very successful. And for some reason, I was able just to pause and breathe. I didn't respond. And as I breathed, I realized I can choose. I don't have to react to this rudeness. And so I got up and walked quietly away. It was a small moment, but it was very pivotal in my understanding of what was possible, what I could do. No, not what I could do, how I could be. And I want to come back to the Kunitz poem for the second reading from that, which is about struggles and losses and many of the things that have happened over the past years which we couldn't choose. the assault on the Capitol, which was the denial of the peaceful right of succession in our presidency, COVID, Ukraine, homelessness, which we see all around us. I don't need to enumerate the problems, the sadnesses, the griefs, the onslaughts that we have faced over the past 3 years, none of which we chose. So this is what Kunitz writes. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. It's not only people that we've lost in the past few years, it's also things that we valued, things that we'd hoped for, things that we'd worked for. Peace in the world. Europe as united, with Britain being part of it. More equality and less inequality. More justice and less discrimination and shootings, and the awful shootings that we've lived through. But even in the face of so much, I believe we can still choose. We have the option. How are we going to be with this? Are we going to be bitter, depressed, thinking of how awful it is for us? Or can we turn, as Kunitz says, turn, with my will intact to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me? In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not in the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. None of us are done with our changes. We can practice learning how we want to be in the face of a world which is not the way we want it to be. My daughter Sarah, when her children were little, would talk to them about strengthening their muscles. She'd say, you can strengthen your generosity muscle, or you can strengthen your patience muscle. And I believe that we can strengthen our tranquility muscles, our freedom to choose how we want to be muscles. And for me, part of this comes through a daily meditation practice. For 40 years, although I'm still very much a beginner, I've been trying to strengthen my meditation muscle to achieve some kind of tranquility in the face of a world and events that I didn't choose. And for me, this daily meditation is not just helpful, it's necessary if I want to try to live my values. And I believe that any practice, breath watch, centering prayer, loving kindness, meditation, any of these can help save us not only from reacting, but despair. Daily practice strengthens us to become the way we want, which I believe is justice-seeking, peacemaking. In the Jewish tradition, tikkun olam means to heal the world. my prayer is that by whatever means, each of us may learn to practice Tikkun Olam.